All right, I see students filing in here and starting to join us, so we'll just give it a minute or two to see the numbers kind of settle, and then we'll get started. All right, I think we're okay to get started here. So hi everybody, thank you for joining today. My name is Dave Hubbard, and I work with the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board. We're very fortunate and thrilled today to have Reggie joining us, and Reggie's from the University of Toronto, St. George. And he'll be talking about the accessibility services available to students at the University of Toronto. For students that are interested in getting some clarification or maybe have a question that they're looking for an answer to, we do have the Q&A feature open, and we encourage you to use that. We're going to have some time dedicated at the end of the presentation to answer some questions that you may have. And without further ado, Reggie, the floor is yours, and thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the introduction, Dave, and thank you for having me today. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Reggie. I'm coming to you from Accessibility Services at the University of Toronto, St. George. So I'll tell you a bit today, a bit about what Accessibility Services does here at the University of Toronto, as well as some of the resources that you can expect when accessing some of our services. So as I begin today's presentation, I want to start off with something called an access check. So through this access check, we understand access to be a shared responsibility between everyone in this space. We will strive to create an accessible space that reduces the need for any one individual to disclose a disability for the purposes of gaining an accommodation. In doing this together, we strive to welcome disability as well as the changes that it brings into our space. A couple of questions that we usually like to ask at the beginning of these presentations. Is there anything about the space that we should address now? And are there any other access needs that might affect your participation that we could also address? A few quick access notes about today's presentation. On the bottom right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a QR code that you can scan, and you'll have, if you do scan that QR code, you'll be able to access some of the slides that we'll be using today. As well, I do believe captions are available through Zoom if that's something you'd like to use. Okay, I don't see any comments coming up in the Q&A or chat regarding access, so I will continue on. However, if anything does come up throughout today's presentation, please do let me know. As well, I will be showing the QR code at the end of today's session as well, in case you'd like another opportunity to download these slides. So this is my agenda for today. So just very briefly, I want to talk a bit about accessibility services and some of the supports that we offer here through our office. I'll then talk a bit about some of the other resources that are available through our office that might be helpful for you as students transitioning to post-secondary. And then lastly, I'll leave some time open for a question and answer period as well. Okay. So I want to start off by talking a bit about accessibility services in general. So the goal of our office is to support students with disabilities with a network of resources to succeed. And these resources can help students navigate their disability as well as related barriers, and also provide students with disabilities different types of academic and social opportunities to engage with university life. So some of the services that we offer through our office include things like determining and negotiating accommodations, providing learning strategy and adaptive technology training and support. We also have a volunteer note-taking program where students can access peer notes from from their classmates around the university. We'll also have peer mentoring and peer advising drop-in sessions for students who want to meet other students with disabilities. And we also do a number of other disability-related supports and services for students, including test and exam accommodations, other programs, and access to funding for disability-related services and equipment where appropriate. So who are we at Accessibility Services? So our office, there are over 40 full-time staff members, and we come from a number of different professional backgrounds. So some of us are social workers, others are occupational therapists. We also do have some psychometrists, as well as special education teachers. In addition, we have about 20 peer mentors and peer advisors who are part of our work study team. And these peer mentors and advisors do help provide some guidance to students with disabilities here at U of T as well. In addition, we have over 2,000 volunteers who work with our service to help support our note-taking program in particular. And one thing to note as well is that we do operate at 14 different sites around the St. George campus. So we work very closely with a lot of the undergraduate colleges here at U of T to make sure that students are supported from many different angles. So who accesses our services? Over the past academic year, we had just over 6,000 students who were registered with us. Now that's a staggering number. And if you do the math, that's about 10% of the U of T student population. This is something that I like to share to tell students that, you're not the only one who's registered with our office. And if you are in a class with 20 or more students, which is, I believe, almost all classes at the undergraduate level here at U of T, likely there's going to be at least one other person who is registered with accessibility services. As well, nearly 90% of our students live with non-evident disabilities, and I'll provide a few examples of what this looks like on the next slide. As well, about 36% of students who are registered with their office had more than one disability for which they are seeking accommodations. So why might students register with their office? So as you can see on the screen here, this is the percentage of students with various types of diagnoses who are registered with their office. As you can see, about 71% of students who are registered with us have a mental health diagnosis. So a mental health diagnosis could be something like generalized anxiety disorder, depression, or maybe even bipolar. And this is something that I like to share with students to destigmatize reaching out for a lot of these mental health supports. We know that reaching out for some of these mental health supports can be quite difficult for a lot of students. So this is something that I like to share to say, again, you're not the only one. And this is something that our office has a lot of experience supporting. As well, as you can see, the second largest population of students we have is students with an ADHD diagnosis. And again, this is something that our office has a lot of experience with supporting. Now, if you add up all the numbers on the screen here, you'll notice that the total percentage of diagnoses exceeds 100%. And that's because about a third of our students, as I mentioned before, have more than one disability for which they're seeking accommodations. So what this means, for example, is that there may be a student with a mental health related diagnosis as well as a learning disability. Or there may be a student with ADHD who has a chronic health or systemic related disability, such as diabetes. And these are just a few examples of where these diagnoses may intersect. So a big part of the work that we do at our office is supporting students through academic accommodations. And oftentimes I get a question from students who are thinking about making the transition from secondary school to post-secondary. And that question is, should I register for accommodations? The answer to that is yes. So we strongly encourage students to register with us as early as possible. One thing to note about these accommodations is that you're not obligated to use these accommodations for every single assignment you have or every single test. Some students may want to try out university without using accommodations, and if that's you, that's totally okay. However, we would encourage you to register with our office early and then give you an opportunity to decide how you want to use your accommodations throughout the year. As I like to say, it's a lot better to have these accommodations, but then not need them, as opposed to, needing those accommodations, but then not having them. It is important to note, however, that there are often peak times throughout the semester. So oftentimes when students are busy within their academics, so is our office here at Accessibility Services. So we do encourage you to register as soon as you're accepted, perhaps even early in the early summer or maybe even in May. We are open all summer, unlike a lot of secondary schools. We do support students through the months of July and August. So you are more than welcome to come see us then as you're making the transition to post-secondary school, I should say. We do have some deadlines near the beginning of every semester, and this is just to ensure that you have access to accommodations for some certain periods, such as the beginning of the semester or for final exams. This doesn't mean that you're not able to register with our office after these times. It just may mean that we're not able to have your accommodations in, for those specific timelines. However, we will still try our best to get you registered with us as soon as possible. Another quick thing to remember is to register for OSAP as early as possible. Oftentimes, for a lot of students who are registered with our office, eligibility for OSAP may unlock funding for other types of bursaries or grants that are related to OSAP. So we strongly encourage students to register for OSAP so that they're able to explore these opportunities as they are registering with us. So I've been talking a lot about registration with our office, and you might be wondering, how does one actually reach out for some of the supports at accessibility services, or how does one register? So registration with our office is usually done in 3 steps. So the first step is to provide some sort of medical documentation. And this medical documentation is often related to your disability. And the medical documentation that you can provide is usually specific to your disability. And I'll provide you with a bit more details of what this might look like in the next slide. After you submit the medical documentation, the next step would be to complete an online intake form. And this online intake form provides us with some information about your academic history, some of the barriers that you've experienced in the past, as well as what supports that you're looking for. The information that we take from your medical documentation and the online intake form is then put together to match you with the best accessibility advisor for your needs. So once we make that match, we would invite you in for an intake appointment. And during that intake appointment, it's an opportunity for you to meet your accessibility advisor, build a relationship with them, and then talk to them about your accommodation plan. You're welcome to meet with your accessibility advisor over the phone or virtually, but we do strongly encourage you to come in person if you're able to do so. On the screen here is a link to some additional registration information. And again, I'll have a QR code at the end of today's session where you can scan and access these slides as well as these links. So I mentioned a bit earlier about medical documentation and that medical documentation is part of the registration process. So the type of medical documentation that you might provide is really different depending on the type of disability that you may have. So for students with learning disabilities, you may have something called a neuropsych assessment or a psychoeducational assessment. And the psychoeducational assessment or neuropsych assessment gives us information of how your disability impacts your academic work. Oftentimes, for the accommodations to be put in place, we would need to see a psychoeducational assessment that's been completed within the past 5 years. However, we recognize that for a lot of students, they may not necessarily have this assessment completed within the past 5 years. And if that if you fall within that situation, what we would encourage you to do then is to bring whatever documentation you have, whether it's a psychoeducational assessment you completed, 10 years ago, and then provide us with that, and then we'll arrange for a psychoeducational assessment if the assessment is out of date or if we need more information. We know that the cost of an assessment can be expensive in some cases. So please don't let the cost of an assessment deter you from registering with us. When you do provide us with your old psychoeducational assessment, or if you do reach out to us for some support, we can talk a bit about some of the available funding options that might be helpful for you to offset the cost of that assessment. That's also part of the reason why we encourage you to wait to get an assessment wait to get a new assessment, but before meeting with us, in that, the assessment that you currently have may provide us with all the information that we need. And as well, we can provide you with more information about some of the funding to help offset the cost of an additional assessment if that's necessary. For other types of disabilities, for example, mental health related diagnoses, chronic health, mobility disabilities, we would ask that you have a certificate of disability completed by your healthcare professional. So this certificate of disability can be found on our website, and it can be completed by your family doctor, psychiatrist, really anyone who you're working with that is qualified to make a diagnosis. Again, if you want to find more information about what this looks like, you can check us out on our website. For those of you who have psychoeducational assessments or maybe looking to get a psychoeducational assessment in the future, we do have a few checklists that are available on our website that provide some information about what we are looking for within a psychoeducational assessment. So oftentimes we are looking for a full report with all the scores, and all of this is detailed in the checklists that are available on our website here. So you don't necessarily have to know and understand all of the details within these checklists, but this is something that you can provide to your assessors or your psychologist so that they're aware of what they need to put in the report when they provide it to our office. So some of you may currently have something called an IEP, an individualized education plan. If there's anyone coming from other, educational institutions, for example, in the States, this is something called a 504 plan. But an IEP is really helpful for us in understanding some of the accommodations you've had in the past. And this is something we certainly welcome as part of your intake package. So when you submit your medical documentation as well as the online intake form. However, the accommodations that you have in high school may not necessarily be directly transferable to post-secondary or to university. And this is because there are different human rights guidelines for post-secondary, as well as there are a greater availability of accommodations at post-secondary. So this means that we can really provide more tailored accommodations to your specific needs. And we also have to keep in mind some of the essential requirements of your programs and make sure that your accommodations still allow you to meet those essential requirements. So this is a part of the reason why accommodations may change as you're making the transition from high school to post-secondary. All that to say, if you have an IEP, you can certainly provide us with that information. However, oftentimes we would need more than an IEP in order to have a full set of accommodations here at post-secondary. Now, we've been talking a lot about accommodations when registering with our office, and these are a few examples of what accommodations may look like at post-secondary. So again, this is something that you may have experience with in high school, but if this is something new for you, here are just a few examples of what this might look like. So for example, you might have access to our volunteer note-taking program where students in your classes, or I should say your classmates, take notes, and then you're able to access those notes anonymously. There may be extensions on written assignments, in some cases, depending on the assignment. You may have access to our adaptive technology training and referrals so that you can use text-to-speech software or adaptive hardware, depending on your needs. You may also need access to testing accommodations. This is a common one for a lot of students. So testing accommodations may include things like a different writing space, extra time on your tests and exams, or maybe stop clock breaks. And these are just a few examples of what accommodations may look like. As I mentioned before, accommodations within the post-secondary setting are often more expansive than they are in the secondary setting. So we have over 100 other accommodation options. And again, they're very much tailored to your specific needs. You'll have an opportunity to discuss what your accommodations may look like during your intake appointment with your accessibility advisor. As well, you'll be able to talk with them about how to use your accommodations too. As I mentioned before, we do strongly encourage students to apply for OSAP or any other provincial funding as early as possible. So you might be able to apply for OSAP as soon as you're accepted. Oftentimes, when you apply for OSAP and you self-declare that you have a disability, you'll be asked to complete something called a disability verification form. This is a little different than the certificate of disability that we ask students to complete for registering with our office. But the disability verification form is something that you send to OSAP to just declare and verify that you do have a disability. If you are eligible for OSAP, and you do have the disability verification form, you may be eligible for something called the bursaries for students with disabilities. So this bursary does support students in accessing different resources and supports and maybe even equipment that is necessary for you to participate in academics. What this may look like and what this might fund really depends on your specific needs. So this is something that you can chat about with your accessibility advisor during your intake appointment. So as I mentioned before, transitioning from high school to university can be quite daunting for a lot of students. One important difference as you make the transition to post-secondary is that the support that we can provide here at university is quite extensive and maybe even more extensive than in high school. However, a lot of the support that is provided is really dependent on you taking the initiative. So we would really rely on you to reach out to our office if things aren't going to plan, or if you're having any issues, or if you need accommodations. And it's really on you to kind of get that process started. There may also be funding that's available for different disability-related services and supports, and this might be through OSAP or the BSWD, as I mentioned before. And lastly, oftentimes within university, these accommodation plans can be much more individualized than the general accommodation plans in high school. And this is because there are more accommodations that are available. However, we do recognize that the transition from high school to university or post-secondary in general can be quite daunting and can be quite difficult for some students. So there are a number of other supports that our office provides. One of those supports that I do want to highlight is our peer advisors and peer mentors. So our peer advisors and peer mentors are upper year students who are maybe in their third, fourth, fifth year, or maybe even graduate school, who are also registered with accessibility services. These peer mentors and advisors can give you advice on how to navigate U of T as a student with a disability. Anything from, are there specific classes that I should be taking? Are there clubs that I should be involved with? I need some help staying accountable to my work. We also do have dialogues and peer connections that are available through accessibility services. And again, these are an opportunity for students like you to build connections and meet other students with disabilities. I've highlighted the adaptive technologist before. The adaptive technologist is a person within our office who would provide training as well as referrals for students to access adaptive hardware or software. And last but not least, we do also have learning strategists here in our office. So learning strategists support students with developing a lot of learning skills through workshops, one-on-one sessions, to really help support students bridge that gap between high school and university. All of the programs that we do offer are a mix of online, hybrid, and in-person offerings. So there's many different ways for you to access some of these resources. One program in particular that I do want to highlight is something called Transition Day. So Transition Day is an event that our office holds every single year. And usually it takes place in April of every year. So within this event, students such as yourself, as well as your parents, any other professionals or teachers within your high school can come for a day and learn about some of the services that we offer here at U of T. So it'll be very similar to what I mentioned today, except it'll be a lot more in depth, and we'll talk a lot more about other services that are available. So we'll talk about things like what is available through our office, how the accommodations process works, as well as the roles of students like yourself, as well as faculty and staff here at U of T. So if you are interested in checking us out and joining this event, you can go to our website at uoft.me/transition day. And you can also share this with your parents, as well as any other teachers or guidance counselors at your school. We do have a summer transition program that happens in July and August of every year as well. And this summer transition program is called Moving Forward. So this program is specifically for students only. And although it is available at most post-secondary institutions, we do have one at U of T specifically for students who are coming to our university. So some of the topics we'll be covering in these events include things like how to find your way around campus, what to expect in classes, strategies on how to navigate your academics, what might be available within our office in terms of resources. And you also have an opportunity to meet faculty members through a mock lecture and your registrar if you need some advice on how to navigate, course selection, for example. So before we go into questions, I do want to just highlight a few resources that I think might be helpful as you make the transition from secondary school to post-secondary school. So one of the main resources that we usually encourage students to check out is something called the Transition Resource Guide. So this is a resource guide that is really helpful for students making the transition to post-secondary education, whether it be colleges or universities. As well, this resource guide has been specifically designed to support students with disabilities. Within part of the resource guide, it starts off by highlighting some of the major differences between high school and post-secondary school with respect to accessing these accommodations. And if you're not really sure where to start, this might be a really helpful place to begin. This here is just a screenshot of the transition resource guide. Keep in mind that the layout of the web pages may have changed since I took this screenshot, but just to give you an idea of what to expect when you check out this website. I do also want to highlight a few resources that are available through our office at Accessibility Services specifically. So all of these links here are available through the slides, which you can use a QR code at the end of today to download. One resource in particular I do want to highlight is our undergraduate student handbook. So this resource is available online through our website. As well, you can access a physical copy when you come visit us in person here at U of T. But this handbook really provides everything that you would need in order to be a student with accessibility services. So it talks a bit about everything from how to register to how to use your accommodations and some of the resources that are available here. So some of the topics that are covered in this handbook include things like registering with accessibility services, how to use your accommodations, and some of your responsibilities as well. So I know we've covered a lot of information today, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to take away at least a few things. So if there's anything from this presentation that you're able to take away, I'm hoping it'll be at the very least these 3 items. So first and foremost, do apply for OSAP or other provincial funding as soon as possible. OSAP, opens at a slightly different time every year, sometime usually around June of every year. So we would encourage you to apply as soon as it opens. And again, that may unlock other funding that would help support some of your disability-related needs during your time at post-secondary. We'd also encourage you to see your own healthcare provider to have some of the documentation completed. Again, what type of documentation you need might depend on the type of disability you have. But suffice to say, all this information is also available on our website. So if you're ever confused, you can check us out there or reach out to us with any questions. And the last thing I would share is that we'd strongly encourage you to begin the registration with our office as early as possible. Sometimes accommodations may take time to put in place. So if you are hoping to have accommodations in time for the start of classes in September, we'd invite you to come reach out to us, maybe even sometime in June, just so we can get that process started and ensure that all of your supports are in place for when school begins. So this is my last slide that I have up here. On the bottom right of the screen are 2 QR codes. One of the QR codes is for our undergraduate student handbook, which you can scan if you'd like to download a copy of our handbook. As well, on the very right side is a QR code of the slides that I'll be using, that I've used today. So if you'd like to download a copy, you can do that too. On the screen here are also the contact information and websites for the accessibility offices across U of T. So I am from specifically the St. George campus, which is in downtown Toronto, and our contact information is in the middle column of the three accessibility offices. We also do have partner offices at University of Toronto Mississauga and University of Toronto Scarborough. So if you're looking to attend either of those campuses or attend some of the programs there, I'd invite you to reach out and check out some of their websites. A lot of what I've shared today is very similar to what of how is very similar to the registration processes at the other campuses, but some of the resources might be a little different. So I'd encourage you to reach out to our office or any of the other offices if you do have any questions. So with that, I believe there's about 15 minutes left for any questions or concerns folks may have.
Amazing. Thank you, Reggie. We've got a few questions from students looking for information on specific programs, entrance requirements, and application process. So, Reggie just shared the undergrad handbook. I encourage you to go through that because you might be able to find some of the information within there. And I encourage you also to connect with your guidance counselors who have lots of information and can support in this area. But we're specifically talking about accessibility services today, so we're going to move on to some of those questions as a priority. So I would like to, one of the students attending here would like to know more about how ODSP, or Ontario Disability Support Program, applies to university, and if there's some supports in place through ODSP for students attending university.
Yeah, that's a great question. So ODSP is a little separate is slightly different than some of the supports that I mentioned a bit earlier. So some students who are students here at U of T and are accessing our services are on ODSP as well. So if you are eligible for ODSP, your eligibility for that program does not impact any other eligibility for other supports such as the BSWD, as I mentioned before. So if you are looking to register with our office, if you are looking to apply for OSAP, we do require and ask for some additional documentation that may be different than what you use to apply to ODSP. So I would say as well that eligibility for ODSP does not automatically mean that you would be eligible for some of the disability related grants through OSAP or registration with our office. However, the medical professional or the doctor that you were working with to apply for ODSP could be the same one that you use to fill out the documentation for our office, as well as some of the documentation that's required for OSAP. So all that to say, ODSP is slightly different from some of the supports that I mentioned. However, you may be able to use that same healthcare professional to work with in order to have some of the other documentation completed.
Amazing. Thank you, Reggie. So we don't have any current questions related to accessibility through University of Toronto. That said, we have some great contact information on the screen. So if any students, parents, or guardians would be more comfortable, emailing directly and reaching out to those services, feel free to reach out and ask those questions. But unless we have any more questions coming in, I just want to say thank you so much for your time, Reggie. This was really informative and helpful, and really appreciate your time and care to share this information with us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Dave.
Awesome. All right, everyone, that wraps up our session here today. We encourage you to head back into the lobby and check out some of the exhibitors and booths that are going on virtually there. And just once again, Reggie, really appreciate you taking the time here to share this information with us and provide us some of this info.
Awesome. Thanks again, Dave. Have a good day, everyone.
Take care.